increase, but over 3 years, it is divided by three, it's 8%, which is a relatively fair increase. So I think that, let's deal with the issues at hand, not make this about bashing the president, and do the work that we need to do. The railroads have said that workers already have sick time. Is that true? Well, let me answer that. Um, it is not true unless what the railroads want you to believe is that when people get sick, they should use their vacation time for sick days. Now, I'm not sure how on the other side of the aisle their offices are operated, but I thought we're all in Congress, so it's done in the same manner. Um, all my staff has sick days. I believe most of the people that work for this body have sick days. I don't know if they don't have sick days on the other side. I would think that would be reprehensible, but that we're fighting for people not to have what we have is unfortunate and unjust. And so we're just trying to do the right thing for the country and for these workers that have not been able to get the railroads, who have had profits out of the stratosphere in the last decade, to get them to do the one thing that the labor unions asked. They didn't ask for the large raise, the benefits, which are all good. They wanted to deal with sick pay, and the railroads refused to do it. And with that, I wish to yield 2 minutes to the gentlelady from Texas, Ms. Sheila Jackson Lee.
I'm on the floor today because I have a heart, and I hope that I will be joining those who will be deliberating very seriously about this legislation. First, however, I want to thank Mr. DeFazio for his leadership on the Transportation Committee and engagement. But I also want to thank my dear, dear friend, Congressman Don Payne, whose vision and commitment and big heart has literally put us in a place where the hearts can control our minds. How indecent is it to have companies who refuse to negotiate with our rail unions, specifically our rail unions? Because I know we have many letters from our suppliers. They don't want to strike. I don't want anything to impact negatively on America or my city of Houston. But I must challenge what we are trying to do with respect to the rail companies. I'm standing with the unions, my locals and my nationals. And the reason is I think we should put into the record BNSF Railway, $23.3 billion in revenue. Union Pacific Railroad, $21.8 billion in revenue. Ownership of BNSF, 46% owned by Wall Street. CSX, 35% owned by Wall Street. Union Pacific, 34%. Kansas City Southern, 33%. Norfolk Southern, 32%. Is there any heart in it being only about dollars? I think it is important that there be a 24% pay raise, bonuses, no changes in co-pays, and allowance of time off for routine procedures. But how indecent it is that they would not sit down and provide sick days in the most dangerous professions. Houston is the crossroads starting from the western frontier days of railroads. We have tracks everywhere. They are an inconvenience for our community, no matter where you live, but predominantly in minority communities. They cause ambulances to stop. They injure and they cause school children to have to cross tracks. And they contaminate our neighborhoods. Can I get an additional minute?
I extend the lady another 1 minute.
They contaminate our
Gentleman is
neighborhoods.
recognized.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, they contaminate our neighborhoods. I know you're in energy and commerce. It is unbelievable, and they won't clean it up. From the EPA to every place we've gone, and people are suffering from cancer. But I want to do the right thing today, and I cannot imagine. Con Res 119 is what I'm standing on, because it does not make sense to not provide people with sick days. Paid sick leave for employees is a bare necessity, which I believe should be extended into paid time off for family medical leave as well. But paid time off for sick leave is a top priority for the rail workers, especially when their jobs expose them to risks such as toxic dangers in the rail yards and dangers on the train as well. It is ironic that the railroads resist providing flexibility to their workers' schedule to provide these sick days. Every company that is decent in America should run toward giving merely sick days, mere 7 sick days. And so I rise to support both my community fighting against contamination, and I rise to support this underlying legislation. I hope the White House will take my call, because I will be trying to determine how this will go forward.
Gentlewoman's time has expired.
Thank President Biden for his great leadership. He is a labor president. I yield back.
Gentleman from Missouri is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would yield myself such time as I may consume. So we were discussing earlier about this being a presidential bashing or whatever the case may be, but I have to ask the question, so why are we here? Why is Congress doing this? The reason is, Madam Speaker, because the president failed. The administration failed. And that's the reason this was brought to Congress, so Congress could intervene and move this forward. And I might also point out that we are debating right now, the package that we are debating is recommended by the president's PEB, by his board that he appointed. The president himself wants us to pass this package. And I'm going to quote the speaker who just, Sunday said, and this is a quote, "This week the House will take up a bill adopting the tentative agreement with no poison pills or changes to the negotiated terms and send it to the Senate." And now they're backing up on that process, and that's really what's wrong, or what's happening today, is they're backing up on that and trying to renegotiate. They're trying to renegotiate this whole process that a lot of people have put time and effort into and came to an agreement, and now, there's no reason anymore. Why do we even have the system set up the way it is if Congress is going to come in and make changes to all of the recommendations? With that, I reserve the balance. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New Jersey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The rank and file union members vote on ratifying contracts. I hope that's understood. After working harder and longer and under worsening conditions for years, they've spoken loudly about wanting to improve quality of life, including paid sick time. The railroads have refused to give them this basic benefit, causing us to be here today. And yes, we are talking about two pieces of legislation here. We are dealing with H.J. Res 100, which is the president's asking us to support and to pass. But, I would not be able to live with myself if I did not respond to the workers that all they've asked for. They started out with 15 days, Mr. Speaker, asking for 15 days of sick time. And we're willing to finally negotiate down to 4, just 4. And yet, and still, these profit grossing railroads could not find their way to give them 4 days. They said, go on unemployment if you're sick. I mean, who asked? Is that something that we ask our employees to do? that we ask people across this nation to do? It's unconscionable. And for, our colleagues on the other side of the aisle not to acknowledge that is just unconscionable. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to wish to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Levin, at this time.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I want to thank the gentleman from New Jersey, not just for yielding me time, but for your outstanding leadership on this issue. And I want to thank Speaker Pelosi for hearing our cry to include paid sick leave today. You know, if the rail unions asked Congress to stay out of this current dispute, I would work hard to honor their wishes. But they have not done so. So the question becomes, what agreement will Congress impose? The Railway Labor Act gives us unfettered power to choose any terms we think fair. In general, I think we should honor the collective bargaining process and pass the TA agreed to by the parties in the Presidential Emergency Board. But we must modify the deal and include paid sick leave. Thousands of rail workers voted against the TA because the precision railroad scheduling system is inhumane and insults the dignity of the workers. Basic justice requires us to act. I would strongly have preferred that we send a clean resolution to the Senate, including sick leave. It's not even December. We have a week. We're in session this week. We're in session next week. Lord knows the industry can afford it. They're making obscene profits and are the very symbol of income and wealth inequality, which is plaguing this nation. Although the way we're doing this is not my first choice, I appreciate our leadership providing us a way to support sick leave for these workers and send paid sick time for rail workers to the Senate, and I hope they join us in supporting a slightly more humane schedule for the rail workers of this nation. Thank you very much. I yield the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Missouri.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At this time, I would yield. Actually, can I inquire the time?
The gentleman from Missouri has 16½ minutes. The gentleman from New Jersey has 14½ minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At this time, I would yield 7 minutes to the gentleman from Arkansas, who's the ranking member of the Railroad Subcommittee, Mr. Crawford.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We are here today because of the colossal failure of Joe Union Biden, the president who has, by his own declaration, been the most union-friendly president in history. Been here since 1970. Joe Amtrak, Joe Lunchbox, whatever you want to call him. He has punted this to us to deal with his colossal mistake. And I can't wait for the rails to be running and make sure they have plenty of rail cars available to haul off these carloads of bovine residue that's being spread around here today because the president waded into something that he wasn't able to finish. And then the misinformation that's being proliferated here about the sick days. Why is there no mention of the actual sick days in the PEB, the number of sick days that we're adding to? In fact, we came to a resolution, myself and soon-to-be Chairman Graves, that codified the PEB recommendation, the 24% pay raise, 24%. Let's keep in mind that we are in a recession. I'd like for us all to get a 24% raise. But we codified a 24% raise, 14% of which would take effect immediately, the balance which would take place over the next 4 years, $5,000 bonus. 8 of the unions of the 12 agreed. That was the PEB recommendation. And we were willing to choke that one down and say, okay, because our economy in this frail, fragile state created by President Joe Union cannot sustain a $2 billion a day economic hit. So for the good of the country, we'll choke that down. Well, then they say, well, we're going to have a cooling off period. We'll think about it. And they come back and say, nope, we're going to strike on December 9th. December 9th. We're approaching winter time. How many people across the country are going to be relying on the commodities necessary to heat their homes? I don't know the millions of people that would be impacted negatively. This isn't about Christmas presents, although that's a big part of it because the economy, we're not going to have as many Christmas presents this year anyway. But on top of it, we're going to freeze people out. And these unions put a gun to the head of the American people and say, this is what we want, and we're not going to play ball. So the president's PEB, the Presidential Emergency Board, makes this recommendation. We go ahead and put legislation in place to support that. And at the 11th hour, here we are. And my friend from New Jersey, the chairman of Rail Subcommittee, said, yeah, we'll take that. We're going to add 1 sick day. Okay, I can live with 1 sick day. What I can't live with is the game they're playing legislatively when they make a promise, we're not going to put poison pills on this bill, and then they come back after the fact and throw this 119 kicker in place. Flat out lie. And another colossal failure on the part of the outgoing speaker, because she couldn't get the votes on her side of the aisle to vote for 100. The PEB recommendation. The PEB recommendation that the president asked for, President Joe Union, and yet here we are having to deal with 119, the additional poison pill that the speaker said would not be present in this legislation. And that's what's wrong with this institution, by the way. When people say they're going to do something and then 20 minutes later they reverse themselves. This came out last night, by the way, late in the evening, so no one would be aware of it. And now we're having to deal with it. Makes a mockery of this institution. And by the way, the authority that we have to deal with this doesn't mandate that we deal with it. It just says we have the authority. And by the way, that authority was given in 1926, almost 100 years ago. What a colossal failure on the part of the president and on the part of the speaker that we have to be here at all, wasting valuable time of this body that we could be doing so many more important things for our people in this country than having to deal with this hostage situation at a time when our economy cannot sustain it. A $2 billion a day hit that is about ready to hit us right in the face at a time when our folks, particularly in the Northeast, that rely on commodities like, for example, heating oil, and we can't move it. And by the way, maybe we could move it more efficiently if our pipelines were working like they should be. But again, the president saw to that. We don't have adequate resources in the trucking industry. We're at a driver shortage. We can't just rely on the trucking industry to fill that void. So again, President Joe Union Biden, Lunchbox Biden, Amtrak Biden, whatever moniker you want to go by, Mr. President, this is on you. This is your failure that you have punted into the House of Representatives to clean up your colossal mess. And with that, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Members are reminded to address their remarks to the chair. The gentleman from New Jersey.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'm, glad to know how the gentleman on the other side really feels about this being a waste of time in saving the nation from a colossal $2 billion hit, as he would put it, that this is a waste of time. I'm glad that he lets the American people know how he really feels about this effort. We are in a situation where we don't have very much of a choice right now for the reasons that he stated. It would be a $2 billion hit to this nation every single day, and it impacting the lives of American families across this nation. So yes, for whatever his disappointment is or whatever it is, we're here, and now we have to act and save the nation from that perilous situation. And I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Missouri.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't have any other speakers at this time. I do want to point out This statement was made. Now we have to act to save the nation. Now we have to act to save the nation. Why is that? It's because the president failed, Mr. Speaker. It's because the administration failed. That's why we have to act. Is it a waste of time? It absolutely is a waste of time because the administration failed. That's the reason Congress is here. Again, I don't have any other speakers, so with that, I would reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves the balance of his time. The gentleman from New Jersey.
I reserve balance of my time.
The gentleman likewise reserves. The gentleman from Missouri.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm prepared to close if you're prepared to close.
The gentleman from New Jersey is now recognized.
Do you have one more? Do they have one more?
Yeah.